Hi, my name's Mark Williams-Cook. I'm director at Canada and founder of Also Asked, and I'm here to talk to you about zero volume keywords. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the problems they cause us as marketers, why I think there's more potential in zero volume than there ever has been before, and lastly, of course, how we can maybe take advantage of that. The reason I chose to talk about this subject is because of Also Asked. So Also Asked basically mines people also asked data and puts it in graphs like this for you. And the number one feature request we've had over the last 2 years is, can you overlay search volume? Please can you add monthly search volumes? When will volumes be added? And being a caring product owner, I've taken the time to answer each one of these queries and tell them that no, I will not be adding monthly search volume. And this isn't primarily out of spite. It's because if you actually added up the monthly search volume for all of these search terms on the right hand side of the screen, you would get a grand total of 0. And this is almost always the case. This is because these search terms, as far as keyword tools are concerned, don't have searches, which is obviously incorrect. So this told me, all of these feature requests told me that maybe some marketers at least are not using search volume data as well as they could do. So I ran a poll and asked, why do we use keyword search volume? What's it useful for? By that I mean I kind of just did a tweet and I got 3 main answers from people, which was forecasting. So we use keyword volume to work out how much traffic we're going to get. We use it to decide what we should write about. And then my personal favorite, which was quite a few people said they use keyword volume because clients like it. That's not something I'm going to talk about at any more length. I don't think it's a particularly great reason to do things, but the other 2 are really interesting. Specifically, I want to talk about forecasting problems. Now, forecasting is a huge topic. I can't do it justice, even if I spent the whole 20 minutes talking about it. All my goal here is to try and sow some seeds. I'm not sure how many of you, if any, already use zero volume searches in your forecasting, because I think if you don't, you can work yourself into a corner. So I think that forecasting on high volume searches only results in what I call strategic fixation. And by that, I mean, if you say, okay, we're going to get this much traffic this year, and we're going to do it by ranking for these 50 key phrases. Hopefully you're not in that situation, but if you're halfway, 3/4 of the way through the year and you're way off target, what tends to happen in my experience is people look back at the strategy and say, oh, well, we're trying to rank for these search terms, so we need to double down on these. And you're actually blinding yourself to other ways to get traffic, or perversely, as many people know, sometimes focusing on the big search terms isn't even the best way to rank for them. I'm sure all of you have seen this kind of search demand curve before as well. And it's worth thinking about that if we set ourselves up this way, we're also setting our forecasting, setting our targets on the hardest to rank for terms. And depending who you ask, which data you look at, we know 70–80% of searches are actually in this long tail, which has very, very little data. A lot of them do come up as zero searches. And this doesn't even include that Google's been telling us since 2017, they recently told us again this year, that around 15% of every search they see is new and they've never seen it before. So we're certainly not including these either. We're basically betting on the minority of keywords, which is, I think, a dangerous way to do our forecasting. We're ignoring the big sway, the 70–80% of searches. And if you've ever as well ranked for something with, say, 100,000 searches, then this really does apply, which is that if you knock someone off the top spot for 100,000 a month search term, they're not just going to stand by and say, hey, well, that was nice. Well, we really enjoyed that money. They will fight you for it. So you actually have to try and think about that in your forecasting, which is how much do we need to invest to stay there? And all of this links to what should you write about? So this strategic kind of positioning on where should we be focusing? I've been in the situation, unfortunately, a few times with clients where they've said, we've chosen not to write about this because it has no monthly searches, which is really frustrating. I've put a link here to an Ahrefs post about why we can't rely on even the keyword search volumes that we do have, let alone the ones that are coming up as zero. A nice kind of thought experiment I like to run through with clients is taking them through maybe searching for something like buy blue running shoes. Now, any keyword tool tells me in the UK this has 0 searches per month. What I like to go through with them is there's probably 20 ways I could rewrite this search query to mean the same thing. So maybe buy blue running shoes UK, or the same query again but with the words in a different order. And it's quite likely maybe each of those actually has maybe 10 searches a month that hasn't come through on our keyword research tool. But all of these critically have the same intent. So if we actually do have 20 different search terms, all with in reality 10 searches a month, we're up to 200 searches a month that's flown completely below the radar that we weren't going to target at all. And this is why I like to say that the intent volume is far more useful than search volume. And that's just in general thinking about SEO as well, because remember, Google's not trying to rank strings of keywords, it's trying to answer people's questions and their intent. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I'll start with a little anecdotal example, which is my own blog. It ranks for some really heavyweight terms, such as the invited player is running a different client version, which, as I'm sure you can guess, has 0 searches per month according to every keyword research tool under the planet. And the reason I'm highlighting this is I wrote 260 words of top tier content. So this huge blog post that you can see here, that's all of it. About a problem I had with a mobile game. Interestingly, 12 months later, I had over 700 clicks on this, not a huge amount, but over 250 of those were on the specific search term, the invited player is running a different client version, which I thought was pretty good considering it had apparently 0 monthly searches. And what particularly interested me, thinking about the concepts we've been talking about, is that I ranked for this term and I didn't even have that phrase in the post. Google had worked out the intent of the search. And this actually starts to stack up quite nicely if you think about your content strategy. So even with this, 260 words of top tier content, if you manage to write one of those articles a week, you would have got almost 19,000 clicks in the first year. If the searches were evergreen and stayed the same the following year, because you had the content from month 1, you would have got almost 40,000 clicks. And again, this is really easy traffic to get, and it's something that lots of people are completely missing off their forecasting and maybe their content creation. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, you've just cherry picked one example there, and I respect your cynicism. So I'll take you through a couple of cool examples of like this site, which went from 0 to 1.3 million organic in 16 weeks. It did that by publishing 500,000 pages of content on just 0 volume searches. Now, of course, it's spammy as heck. It's written, I think, by AI. The link profile is terrible, but the point is it worked. There's lots of sites like this. There's another one that goes from 0 to 500,000 in 12 weeks. There's another one that goes from 0 to 2 million in 12 weeks. Jake's done a brilliant blog post just summarizing some of these sites and how they're doing that. But what I'm interested in is that this works really well. And the question I would ask as a kind of white hat SEO that's going to follow Google's rules is, why does it work? And this is when we need to think about Google's recent algorithm updates. So in June 2019, we had domain diversity, and domain diversity came along to fix I think primarily a problem whereby, especially for long tail queries, Google wouldn't really understand exactly what it was you were searching for. So they were like, well, here's a bunch of sites that I really trust, and yeah, they mentioned something similar, so why don't you look at them? And this actually resulted in an issue of Google ranking the same big sites again and again, sometimes 3 or 4 times in a single SERP. It became so bad that they did this domain diversity update where they essentially said, yeah, that's not great, we're just going to kind of patch that for you. So the result was Google did an update that made basically an opportunity for especially smaller sites to rank for these longer tail queries because there was just more room now in the SERPs. However, Google has always told us that these very specific searches can be the hardest to get right. And they made a big breakthrough at this in October 2019 with BERT. Now BERT has loads written about it. If you haven't heard of it, it's essentially Google got much better at understanding the nuance of queries, so the importance of little connecting words, especially that we take for granted as humans. So the example they give is, can you get medicine for someone, pharmacy? As a human, it's very obvious that that query is asking if you can get medicine for someone else, but Google didn't used to understand that. But since BERT, they've been able to understand the nuance of these queries, and critically, it's not changing how they're ranking websites, it's changing the content they're looking for, which I think is a big difference. So again, Google's made an update that's essentially reduced its reliance on other metrics and opened up the playing field to other sites, especially smaller sites. Case in point, my tiny little blog for that query outranks the official game website and it outranks Reddit. I'm pretty sure Reddit's got more links than my blog, but it's a really good demonstration again of how Google's nailed the intent and picked some content from a smaller site where it's a better fit. And BERT is estimated to affect 10% of US English queries, which is billions and billions of searches. We then had passage indexing 1 year later. Passage indexing essentially gave Google the ability not just to rely on the relevance of a whole document, but find a needle in a haystack in this long form content. Again, they've given some really interesting examples. So this one around specifically determining if you've got UV glass, and Google can now actually dive into the content and pull out an answer. So again, it's looking in a different place because it understands the query and it's got more tools to find that answer. So you're probably seeing a trend here. I think this was another update that really helped open up the playing field for smaller sites, reducing Google's reliance on other metrics. And again, huge update, affected 7% of queries globally, billions and billions and billions of searches. The summary of this point is that I think Google's lens is now wider than ever. By that I mean it's looking in different places for the answers to search queries because it understands those queries so much better. The technology it's got as well for understanding the content on the sites has also moved with the times. So this means that I think there's a whole area of land grab now for very specific answers that Google's looking for that there is essentially a content drought for. So how can we take advantage of this? There's 3 sets of tools that I particularly like to use, which is Answer the Public to identify niche topics, Also asked to explore intent within that topic, and then I like to use Google custom search engines to do what I call beat the feature, which is essentially manage to produce the content before Google's even generated things like featured snippets or people also ask. So answerthepublic.com, very simple tool to use. Lots of people know about it. Some people still don't, which is why I always include it. It's very simple. You enter normally a like single word or 2 words is best, because what Answer the Public is going to do is primarily use this Google autocomplete, Google suggest data. It's going to append, prepend your searches with things like why, how, can, to generate this big list of questions. So you'll get something that looks a little bit like this. I know it's very tiny for you to see. So I've searched for jigsaw puzzle and just pulled out some of the kind of questions that it surfaced for us. So things like help finishing jigsaw puzzles, why play jigsaw puzzles, which jigsaw brand is best, what is the jigsaw with the most pieces. So this gives us maybe 4 things we might want to write some content about. And if we choose one of these, such as why play jigsaw puzzles, we can then take this over to also ask to explore a little bit deeper, because generally if you put long questions into Answer the Public, because of the way it works, you won't get the best results back. So Also Asked, as I said, uses people also asked data. I've put a link in here to an SEM Rush guide, so you can get the most out of this. They've got a really big study on basically how to integrate PAAs into your content strategy. But much like Answer the Public, you can put in your keywords, your phrase, your question into Also Asked, and it will mine the sets of questions that you will get at each level. So for why play jigsaw puzzles, Google's telling you might want to cover topics such as, do they increase IQ? Do they help relax you? And what's so powerful about this map of questions is that you're seeing the relationships directly between them. So what I mean by that is Google's saying if someone searches for why play jigsaw puzzles, they are probably going to have specific questions about what are the benefits, or does it affect IQ, or does it relax you? And if you answer these questions, you are probabilistically the better answer. So that's why the connections between these questions for me are so interesting. So if we take something like why play jigsaw puzzles, we can very quickly compile a list of questions that we might want to include in a content brief, such as what do they help develop in adults? Do they help children? IQ, relaxation, are they good for the brain? The other cool thing about People Also Ask data is it moves really quickly. So the day after Kim Kardashian wore this, which I guess is like a ninja suit, at the Met Gala, we had new questions in PAAs coming up. So it's really interesting data in terms of how quickly Google can surface them based on demand as well. And lastly, we can use what are called Google custom search engines. I think they might be called personalized search now, to beat the feature, to basically set up real-time tracking for this. So this works particularly well on sites such as Reddit or Quora, although it will work on all kinds of sites. And I'm sure many of you SEOs before have used a site operator to search a specific domain for a topic. You can take this one step further. So here I'm searching just reddit.com and I'm picking a specific subreddit and searching for the phrase how do I, and that's going to return all of the how do I questions from that particular subreddit, that topic, that niche. And of course you can have can I or any different variation to get different types of questions. So I've done this search on the Bitcoin subreddit, and Google will give you all of the latest questions people are asking about Bitcoin. Now, rather than do this manually, you want to go to cse.google.com and you can set up a custom search engine just to search, for instance, the Bitcoin subreddit if you wish. And you will get essentially a more ugly version of the Google search results in your custom search engine. But why this is helpful is Google will give you programmatic API access to these results. So a really easy way to get a feed of up to the minute results. So you can do some very easy basic things like create a feed for your content writers, so they constantly every morning when they come in have all the latest questions to answer about a particular topic. Or you could use the JSON, pull it into Google Sheets and pull in questions from Reddit, and then automatically do a site search on your site to see if you've got content that covers that topic, where it is, or if you have a gap. Again, you can tweet me if you want a copy of this sheet. So you can set up some really cool automations like that. I mean, you could go really far and just use GPT-3 to automatically get the questions and then write the answers for you, but that's none of my business if you want to do that. My points here is, I'd like to summarize by saying, I think you should include zero volume in your strategy, in your forecasting. It will make your life a lot easier. It will open all kinds of doors for you. And really, I hear a lot of people talking about hub and spoke approaches to content, which I'm fully behind. I don't hear a lot of people saying, definitely start with the spokes. Starting with the spokes is the easiest place to rank. You can start getting traffic, you can start getting links, and then you can build those hubs. Definitely start with the spokes. And lastly, automate real-time question discovery. I haven't seen lots of people do this. I find inspiration is one of the harder parts when it comes to content planning. And if you rely, again, the other downside on relying on key phrases with known search volume is they tend to be old. So you're going to basically be just chasing the same search terms as everyone else. If you set up real-time question discovery, you're going to get all these long tail questions that no one has written content about yet. And that gives you a big opportunity to be the first to publish the answer, making you essentially one of the only choices for Google. And then when Google does get around to its feature generation for featured snippets, for PAAs, you're going to be there and you can take those features. That's everything I've got to say about zero volume search. I hope you found it interesting. Do feel free to connect to me on Twitter, or you can see my slides on the link below on SlideShare.